Is everyone back from the coffee break? Good, excellent. Then we can start. We can start actually with the final leg of this two-day conference. We have about an hour and a half to go. And just to sum up quickly the things that we've been discussing so far. By the way, I'm Florin Zubascu, Executive Editor of Science Business, and it's a pleasure to moderate this final part of this conference. And as I said, we've been discussing quite a few interesting things, especially yesterday morning, but also today, at least in the aviation panel debate. We had a bit of fun with some provocative questions as well. But the main question is, what do we do in Europe to deliver on the promises of the Green Deal? So how do we move the technologies that are currently under development? How do we move them into the market? So to start that final discussion, we have a presentation from Capeans. She's head of the site and civil engineering department at CERN. And she will give a presentation about what CERN has been doing to move energy innovations from lab to market. And after her presentation, she and I will have a quick Q&A on to talk in more general terms about what research infrastructures can do to help in the green transition. So that's it from me for now, and I'd like to welcome Mar at the lectern and give her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, thank you for being here today. I think some of you have already heard this talk or part of this talk yesterday in a very, very interesting discussion we had about what was the role of innovation ecosystems and research infrastructure. So I have this additional opportunity to pass again a few key messages. And I hope the debate will bring different aspects. So I am Marc Capeans. I am a physicist at CERN, and I have done 30 years of particle physics at CERN. But I am, since a couple of years, the head of site and civil engineering, which is a very interesting department at CERN because we are planning how the organization has to evolve in the future towards new research infrastructures, new research programs. And by looking at the organization from this perspective, we also thought that we have something to add to the discussion of net zero and sustainability, which is, I think, what I wanted to discuss today. So I just had this fantastic question, which is, I thought CERN was a lab. And yes, indeed, CERN is a lab. This is, I like to call it more like one of the largest research infrastructures in Europe. So we do science, but we also work very, very closely with industry to develop the technologies that we need to do science. So I think we are very unique in the world in technologies like accelerators, cryogenics, vacuum, and so on. And this makes that CERN can be seen as a lab for fundamental science, but also a very powerful research infrastructure where we develop technology. I think the most well-known example is the World Wide Web that we created to be able to share real-time the information between scientists, and then it became what we all know today. So this is just an example. So it does take a green village. What does it mean when we say that title? So I think CERN is one organization where the commitment, I think I don't manage to move this. Yep. I'm sorry, I cannot manage to move the slides. They're in the back. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, I think we are in the second one, so I go one back. Yes, because I think this is important to say. What are part of the CERN mission is also to have societal contributions. And Fabiola Gianotti, which is our Director General since almost 10 years with 2 mandates, very clearly said at the beginning of her mandate that CERN had to be a role model for environmentally aware science. And this is a very strong statement, and it has been declined in the last 8 years in a number of many different measures, from having energy panels that look at the very single watt that we consume to do science, to publish how is our impact on the environment with everything related to water, to energy, to mobility, anything you can imagine, and targets which are aligned with the targets for the 2030 and 2050. And these are public targets. We also work in procurement, a sustainable procurement policy. And we have also made a very powerful document, which is the Master Plan 2040, which is a plan that no matter what is the future that CERN will take in terms of science, and this nature will tell us where do we have to go with our next infrastructures, there is a way that we want to develop our campus, which is whatever we will do, we want to do it from many different perspectives and integrating from the very beginning very important aspects like environment, urbanism. What does it mean with urbanism? It means densifying, trying to use the less land possible for research infrastructures, landscaping, which is being respectful as well of the biodiversity, and mobility. We are a very large organization. I didn't say at the beginning, but we have a budget of about 1,200 million Swiss francs every year to do science. Science is done, of course, by the people, which is at CERN, which is about 3,000 employees. But we have this floating population of scientists from all over the world that come at CERN, and they are about 13,000 that come at CERN to do science. So you can start to see CERN almost like a city, and this is the privilege I had when I took this job of becoming the head of site and civil engineering. And thinking of CERN not only as a science infrastructure, but also as a little village, we started to identify what are the challenges that we have in front of us to make that this village, it can become also an example of how you should do science in large infrastructures. And that's how the Green Village concept was born, which is to say, well, we do have challenges at CERN. Those challenges are very common to another village or any city in the world because we want to minimize our impact. So this is your lab. Our doors are open. Come and test any solution or any technology you have that could make more sustainable the planet. We are open. Come and test it with us. So what is the unique value of this proposal of CERN, which is not only seeing CERN as a research infrastructure, but also as test bed for any type of sustainable technologies, is that collaborating is in our DNA. I mean, our projects are so challenging that we do need to collaborate with people from all around the world to develop the technologies and then to do science with those technologies. And something which is also very important for CERN, which is the engagement and integration of young innovators when we do things. A very clear example of this integration of young innovators is a facility we have at CERN, which is called Idea Square, that receives about 600 students from any field. These are not only scientists that come to CERN to do science, but these are the students that come to learn about innovation with a program that is called Challenge-Based Innovation. And we put them together in groups, and they are from design, architecture, engineering, journalism, and they take the technologies we have at CERN to do basic science, and they basically twist them around to try to see if with those same technologies we can help to solve or align to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So just to give you an example, we have 600 of those students, and I think I also mentioned yesterday that they drink about 20,000 coffees per year to do that work. So that's what I mean that, it is in our DNA to collaborate, to discuss, to challenge assumptions. And you can't imagine the level of creativity of the things that we do at CERN and how they imagine and prototype, because they use the prototyping installations that we have at CERN for those solutions that can help society. Not only that, I think this Green Village concept also incorporates that CERN is a very, very well-known research infrastructure with a very, very clear program. So it becomes also a showcase and a fantastic place to say, well, we are working on this technology for the planet in this research infrastructure, which already exists. So I wanted just to mention a couple of things. And we believe that when you talk about innovation, the problem comes first, and then we look for the solution. So one of the very first things we did when thinking who could collaborate with us on Green Village, we thought that it was important that at least we identify what are the problems we want to solve at CERN, that in any case, they are scalable and that they can be transferred to society. So we do have the problems that many other people has, which is thinking on smart energy. We are a big consumer of energy to do particle physics. Green mobility, this is very important for us. This is a very, very large site. Just to give you an impression, the people coming to CERN to work, the contractors that do maintain our installations, if you count the number of movements of cars per day, it's about 25,000. So green mobility is very, very important for us. Waste collection, this is very important. We are now on the movement to not generate waste, and the one we generate, either we recycle it or we reuse it. And this is very important for the future research infrastructures and, of course, for the cities. Urban analytics, very important. It's very difficult today to know how can you plan the services of an organization or a city if you don't know who is going to be the final user. Key for us, office space management with telework, with people working remotely. We should rethink how we use the buildings, the assets that we already have on site, and of course, environmental monitoring. So these are the challenges we have, and this is how we want to work on this with everyone around the world. And I think we have one main condition, which is when you want to collaborate with us to develop a sustainable technology and come and test it at CERN, the maturity of your technology has to be at the level of the TRL 4 or 6, because the idea is that we don't want to procure something, we want to develop it with you, and that you use CERN as a place to test it and bring it to market very fast. And that is why the title of this presentation says CERN, Green Village, from lab to market, because we want to accelerate and shorten that gap, helping the people to come test and bring it to market. Of course, it means that the technology you want to test on a realistic site has to need a realistic environment to be tested. We don't want to open the site to everything. And of course, very important to focus on research collaboration. We believe that innovation, collaboration is one of the key aspects where innovation can succeed. So I think a very last point. I think when yesterday we discussed quite a lot as well about the innovation ecosystems, and I think we all agreed that they work when they have a purpose. And I would say that that is right. An innovation ecosystem should have a purpose, should have a why, but it also needs people and it needs infrastructure. Otherwise, innovation cannot really go to the next step. And I think something which I would like to add, and I find very important, is you need the purpose, you need the people, you need the infrastructure, but you also need funding. And that's why for us it's very important to bring this concept of Green Village to all this, I would say, variety of available EU funding, because we need funds to do this in a proper way. And I think it's also in the DNA of the Commission to put the right stakeholders together. So I think this is important, but that's not the only way. We are also open to have direct collaborations with specific companies or other ecosystems where you have a good idea that you want to test and you need a site to test. We are open to do this with you, even if it is without EU funding. So why do we this? Not an easy question to answer. And I will summarize it in 2 sentences. I think we all have to play where we matter the most. And I think CERN can be seen not only as a fantastic lab for fundamental science, but also a very powerful research infrastructure in Europe. And I think we know how to do that well, to run research infrastructure. So I think this is the key component. And the second component, I think, of this Green Village is to partner for impact. So I think we can do a lot of things on our own. We have CERN is full of very smart people. There is no doubt about that. But I think we also need to partner with other experts outside the organization to make sure that whatever we do is sustainable and that the next projects in CERN become sustainable for definition. And that is why our way to go is to target transformative innovation, and we are open to be a partner for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Now, I have a few follow-up questions, if I may. How old is this project? So for how long have you been doing it? And what are the results so far?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think the very first ideas to start setting up, because the idea is not new. I mean, the idea of having these ecosystems in the university campus is not new. But what we thought it was important is when we started to see what were our challenges to make our campus, our science, greener. And then we started to see that we had too many commonalities with many efforts that were already outside. So I think the first seeds of the idea were in summer 2021. We have been very, very busy internally to try to establish a right legal framework for that. And I think this is very interesting because CERN is an international organization. We have our own rules. And I think that's one of the key aspects of Green Village, that the way of accessing infrastructure is quicker because we make our own rules. And I think this is something unique. Sometimes, I mean, we all know these examples of campuses that have tried to become test beds for autonomous car. And when you get the permits, basically the autonomous car is already broken. So this is something, you know, we have like 70 kilometers of roads that we manage. So this brings a lot of opportunities. So I think, you know, first idea, summer 21, 1 year to set up the whole framework. And I would say, being very honest, 3 to 4 months to say no to many people, because when we started to talk about Green Village, what many people wanted to come is to sell us things. And this is, we don't look for procurement partners, we look for partners that are developing something, that there is already a proof of concept and they need to test it quick. So now we have responded to a EU call last year that was unsuccessful, which is a pity because we were partnering with other research infrastructures in Europe to do pilots on sustainability on many different topic domains. And we have now in the pipeline a couple of projects within Green Village, what I call direct collaboration. One is about air pollution monitoring with all the good attributes that air pollution monitoring should have today: Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, low power, low cost. And a second one that we are preparing, which is testing Wi-Fi repeaters, which are passive in underground installations, for instance. So there you see a very clear example that how our underground installations, which is also a uniqueness of CERN, can be used to accelerate this type of testing.
Right. As you all know, last year, the big research infrastructures in Europe and beyond ran into a little electricity problem,
Yes.
CERN included. And you mentioned that one of the goals for the Green Village is to tackle that issue as well. You know, the massive amount of energy that is needed to run the lab. So, what's have you had any projects that deal with that in the Green Deal
Yes.
in the Green Village?
Yes, I thank you for the question. I think this is a very big problem for any research infrastructure, and in particular for CERN. You know what CERN does. We basically accelerate particles and we convert energy into mass and vice versa. So when you have to accelerate particles to the speed of light, you need a lot of energy to start with. So there, I think there are two aspects. The first one is that we have to solve the problem very quickly, very, very quick today. You know, we cannot wait for Green Village to be ready with prototypes for the future. This is a problem of today. And there, CERN had a very quick reaction, touching on several aspects. One of them is reducing the scientific program for some weeks, and this has a direct translation into savings. The second one is to look into alternative sources of energy. For the moment, we had a unique supplier, and now we are open to a more diverse market. And there is many measures like that, like becoming, certified ISO 50001 to have this culture of energy improvement completely. So this is one aspect, and this is for today. In the very future, I think all of us, we will have to find many different ways to use in different types of energy. And I think one of the key issues will be the integration of all that. So we are extremely open to be a test bed for this type of projects. This is complex. This is very, very complex, and we need long discussions. But this is a place where this can be done.
Can this model be, this model of the Green Village, can be applied to other research infrastructures? Do you know what's the state of play at the moment?
Yes, I think so. I mean, for us, we are at a very, very early stage, and we stumble to set up the principle in quite normal projects like the legality or what the market expects, and this it has taken time to solve. So we will have to see what is the outcome. I think where we are very good is at measuring the outcome, and this is a little bit the process that we will take with this. We will commit to really bring the progress on board and measure if we have been successful or not, and then think if this can be scalable to other research infrastructures. I have to say that the concept has been very well received, and that's why we managed in very short time to put together a proposal for the Commission that we were partnering with 6 different research infrastructures, because it is very clear that there is an ambition to be a powerful stakeholder in this change by the research infrastructures. I think Europe has invested not only on buying assets for these infrastructures, but also on the people that runs them and use them, and we all look forward to be part of the discussion.
Okay. One final question, just to clarify, what kind of projects are you looking for? Is it research teams, startups, SMEs?
Everything.
Everything.
Everything. And I think the better we mix them, the better we'll be.
Okay.
Yes.
And it doesn't really matter the field, right? It can
No.
be STEM or social sciences. Okay, good. That's very good to know. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your presentation. Let's give Mar another round of applause. And now I would like to invite on stage to give a keynote speech. I would like to invite Joyeeta Gupta. She's full professor of environment and development in the Global South at the University of Amsterdam. And she will talk a bit about global boundaries and what the world is doing to manage that problem. Thank you.
Thank you. So every cup of coffee your guests drink involves 140 liters of water somewhere else in the world. And that brings me to my story, which is, went too fast. Anyway, which is about Earth system boundaries. So essentially the narrative is that if you want to live within the planetary boundaries, but we call them Earth system boundaries because we look at boundaries from local to global level, then this requires a just approach. And we don't really talk about justice in this community, so I hope it is of some interest to talk about it. The key messages that I have are safe Earth system boundaries are not necessarily just. How do we create an Earth system justice approach? In terms of Earth system justice, we talk about ends, so we try to create just boundaries. We also show that we have crossed these boundaries. Another ends of Earth system justice is providing minimum access to people in relation to the SDGs. You talked about SDG 6, for example, so energy, and many of you are also talking about SDGs. So is that possible to achieve that? And then we talk about transformation. So basically, in our Earth system domain project, this is a project of the Earth Commission, and it was also co-financed a little bit by the European Research Council's advanced grant. We looked at aerosols, climate, biosphere, water cycle, and nutrient cycles at the global level. And then Our natural scientists and ecologists, they tried to find out what are the safe boundaries to maintain the resilience of the Earth system. And so what we found was we got a large number of numbers with respect to each of these systems. Just to give you an example on water, we say that surface water should flow, should not divert more than 20% in relation to the past, the baseline years. And this is a per monthly basis. And in terms of groundwater, you should not take out more groundwater than you feed back into groundwater. And I'll give another example of climate change. And climate change, they concluded that beyond 1.5, you can trigger a number of tipping elements and it becomes very, very unstable, the climate system. But the question that arises is, are these boundaries just enough? And so what we tried to do was to first create a justice narrative for the whole world. So one of the stories of justice is to look at recognition justice. When you look at things from your perspective, you're trying to see the trade-offs from your perspective. And in that perspective, maybe the guy who lives in the small island state does not matter. But in recognition justice, you look at justice from the perspective of the most marginalized. And in epistemic justice, you look at how do other sciences look at these issues. We then try to look at three types of justice: interspecies justice and Earth system stability, intergenerational justice, and intragenerational justice. Then we looked at some procedural aspects of justice, so information to make informed decisions, decision making, access to civic space, access to courts. In terms of substance, we look at how do we access basic resources and ensure that everybody in the world can access these resources. And the next part is how do we allocate the remaining resources once we have provided everybody basic resources. And then we also need to look at how do we allocate risks and harm and resources after deducting minimum resources. Earlier on, I was in a discussion where people were talking about rate of return on investment. The question is whether that rate of return on investment takes into account the damage caused to people somewhere else in the world. And if it did take it into account, then would it be quite as attractive as perhaps green investment? Maybe it would become, green investment would become much more attractive if we would actually factor those kinds of liability insurance in this process. Anyway, that's our framework. We apply it in two ways. In terms of ends, we look at just minimum access and just boundaries. And in terms of means, we look at how do we address drivers of ecological degradation, how do we look at liability, and we revisit allocation mechanisms. So just to give you an example on climate change, since all of you are probably working on it in some way or the other, in fact, at 1.5 degrees centigrade, around 200 to 500 million people are already exposed to harm from sea level rise. I'm not including extreme weather events or anything else. It's quite a lot. And scholars haven't even done the research for how many millions of people are harmed at 1 degree. And that's really worrying. We passed 1 degree a few years ago, but what we can see with wet bulb temperature, that is the orange line at the bottom, at that line we see that at 1 degree, tens of millions of people are exposed to more than 1 day of extreme high temperatures. And that can lead to death. If you're exposed to it for a day or so, you die. And this basically means that every time we are saying in our analysis there are trade-offs, we've got jobs here and we've got profits there, etc., we don't care if somebody somewhere else far away dies. And this is a real problem for me because in the whole process, IPCC has been very careful not to be prescriptive about what should happen by policymakers because they're not allowed to be prescriptive. They're allowed to only say what's relevant. And they do provide some evidence. But it was only after the EU and other countries forced IPCC to do a 1.5 degree report after Paris that the 1.5 degree report came. But now we have published in Nature, so not any journal, we published in Nature that actually 1 degree is a much more just target. And we all know how far we are from 1 degree. So I'll give you another example. We have not crossed planetary boundaries for air pollution. That's the one over there, aerosol pollution at the global level. But it is an issue which causes the deaths of more than 7 million people annually. So we asked also to come up with standards for the local level to ensure that people don't die. Now, in this particular graph, we're trying to show the green area is the safe and just areas. The blue area shows what is just, and the red area shows what is safe. And you will find that our blue boundary is more stringent for nitrogen, and it's more stringent for aerosol pollution and for climate than the safe boundary. Have we breached these boundaries? We have breached 7 out of 8 just safe and just boundaries. So the balls outside show you that we are outside the green circle, and the climate boundary, we have not yet breached the safe boundary, but we are very close to breaching the just. We have breached the just boundary. That's why the ball is between the blue and the red. This is at a global level. If you look at it at a local level, then all the areas are pretty dark in color. They have breached between 3 to 7 boundaries at the local level. If you look at the world as a whole, around 50% of the land area has breached at least 2 targets affecting 86% of the world's population. So we have to think a little bit more globally about what we are talking about within Europe. So the next question is, how can we live within the safe and just Earth system boundaries? Now, since we are already outside the boundaries, it's very clear that if we now, on top of that, want to meet basic needs of everybody, we will cross the boundaries. We did a little thought experiment for the year 2019, where we looked at everybody who is below the minimum and provided them with basic food, water, energy, and infrastructure. Energy is 3 bulbs in a fridge. Infrastructure means a house of around a parking lot. So it's really very minimum. And we had 2 levels, level 1, which is a dignified level, and escape from poverty, which is the pink level. And what you find is that when you calculate this access in terms of emissions onto phosphorus or nitrogen or land use, water use, and climate change, then you find that the additional impact is at 5.6, that yellow bit, for climate change, if you provide the poorest people with minimum access. And if you give them a little bit more access to help them escape from poverty, then you're at that pink level. And what this basically means is that it's not possible for us to live within planetary boundaries and meet the social SDGs that we've all committed to without radical transformation of our global society. And for me, that means that when we are talking about electric cars, we shouldn't be, because we can't possibly have a world full of electric cars. We need to have much more electric public transport worldwide. So basically, how do we move from outside to within that green space? In fact, the bottom of the green space is by giving everybody in the world, so all of you also, 3 bulbs and a refrigerator and the minimum amount. And then we have the upper limit, the blue limit. And in between, you have the space. For climate change, we don't have any space unless we radically transform. So basically, what we are arguing in our radical transformation, I just don't know why the slides have suddenly shrunk, but anyway. Basically, one of our key goals is the only way you can solve the problems of all these environmental issues if you focus on the drivers of both environmental degradation as well as inequality. And one of the key drivers of environmental degradation, and I'm being provocative now because everybody in this room is talking about profits and about GDP, indirectly or directly, those are the big problems. We can't provide every country in the world higher GDPs. If you look at the G77 summit report from last weekend, they basically all want to become like the West. All low-income countries want to become middle income wants to high income wants to become very high income, and very high income doesn't want to stop. And therefore, what we're talking about is more and more production, more and more mining, whether it's in Europe or in the developing world, more and more. And that's just not going to help us live within the boundaries we have. So we have to completely redefine what it is when we talk about return on investment, or what we talk about when we talk about how do we invest our shares, where do we put our money. Also, I think a big problem that we have is we've never actually talked about the liability of countries or of companies towards other people, or of even of individuals. But essentially, if a company has been producing a particular product and has been responsible for a certain amount of damage globally, a certain percentage, they should be held liable for that. And we too, for our lifestyles. And that liability part has to come in somehow in this whole narrative. Otherwise, we will not get change. And I think that needs to change our rate of return discussions. Then we are talking about changing allocation rules. If you have scarce resources and you allow the market to decide, then basically the price will go up and nobody can afford it except for the super rich. And that doesn't work. You're just going to end up in a system which doesn't work. So I'm not going to go through the last two rest of the story, but I want to give you two examples why I think a focus on cost recovery can be problematic. A narrow focus within Europe, for example. So let's take climate change. More than 70 to 80% of our fossil fuels are in the global south. Now, we want to get to net zero. I talk to my global south students, and they're all the time telling me, but why can't we just use our fossil fuels? You guys used it. It's our turn. You guys became rich. It's our turn. How are we going to convince them not to use that fossil fuel, especially when our industrialists, our technology guys, our shareholders, our investors are investing in this in the global south, and our governments are helping with that investment through export credit. So this is going to be a big problem. We cannot solve the problem if we don't take the whole world with us. So in some ways, if China wants to use some of the best technologies we have in Europe, that may be a good sign, because maybe they become very sustainable and that reduces the pressures on the earth. The other question I want to give you is, let's say toilets. Toilets are probably, everybody here in this room thinks very little about a toilet, but there are a large number of Europeans who don't have access to toilets, and of course worldwide. Now, if you make people pay for their use of toilets, then basically what will happen is they will go for open defecation because that's cheaper. And that is going to cause greater problems to the entire society, because you'll get all kinds of water pollution related diseases. So I think in some cases, we really have to revisit how we organize our markets and our systems. Implications for technology choices. Some of you are discussing net zero technologies. And I was just thinking, if you focus on net zero with relation to carbon, does that solve other problems? Do we have problems when we are talking about air pollution and water pollution, especially when we go in for lithium mining? And of course, if we bring it now into Europe, we will get those same problems here. So is it just the NGOs who are critiquing, or is it science just showing you the results that these waters are getting polluted? So how do we think about these things, about the net zero technologies? Also, net zero technology should not come at the cost of social justice. So it's one thing is environmental justice, the other one is social justice. If technologies become too expensive, then nobody can afford it, and that will become a big challenge for the rest of the world. And also wanted to talk a little bit about afforestation briefly. A lot of people want to be net zero, a lot of companies want to be net zero, and they all want to invest in forests. And we have a large number of forestry programs worldwide. A student of mine who's working on green water said that she went through many of these forest programs, and not one looked at how much water is needed to grow these plants. And there's a company, I think in Italy, that is trying to sell trees as a birthday gift. So I give you a gift, it's a tree, and actually it's a tree that they grow in Kenya or Ghana or somewhere else. So I asked them, how do I know that this particular tree has been given? They said, they'll give me some kind of chip. So I said, oh, you're going to make all these different chips for every single forest. No, they're not making all these different chips for every single forest. So essentially, the question is, are there enough trees or land on which trees can be grown for all the birthday presents that we can give each other, so that we can feel comfortable to sit in our electric cars or in our flights? Anyway, so I conclude with my messages. Safe Earth system boundaries are not just enough. We need an Earth system justice approach. In terms of ends, we must make sure that the boundaries are just, and we must make sure that everybody in the world meets the minimum amount. But this is not going to happen within the existing boundaries in the current system that we have. This means that we have to transform. Or you could come back and say, we are not going to follow the SDGs. That's also possible. But if we say we want to do the SDGs, then that requires us to do transformation. I think I will leave that story there.
Thank you very much for this speech. One question before we move on to the panel. So your conclusion is technology alone won't solve the problem. So who else do we bring in? Do we bring sociologists, economists? Do we start a new religion? What do we do?
I think we have to completely redesign our economic systems, but also our legal contracts, because a lot of the problems are in those contracts. And we have to, so you'll need actually all the disciplines to work together, not just technology experts. I think technology has a role to play, but again, if you multiply the number of particular products you're going to make, they also have a demand on materials, they also have emissions related to that. If not with carbon, they have a water footprint or something else.
Okay. And you mentioned green growth. Is that possible?
I don't think so.
Why?
Because I think green growth is a fig. You're asking me for my opinion. I think green growth is a bit of a fig leaf, because if the whole world tries to go for green growth, it's just not possible to do that without huge new investments in all kinds of mining activities worldwide, because we don't yet have the materials for circular economies in terms of the electric cars or electrification. For the batteries, we just don't have those materials. So you need a massive amount of resources. And all those resources will lead to some kind of pollution or the other. So we need to either change the way we eat, so less meat, less wastage, because we waste 1/3 of our food. So lots of things we have to do, but we have to do it together, and we have to do it in a system where the market does not profit from wastage. Today, the market profits from wastage.
Yeah. Or we start mining in space. All right. Thank you very much for your speech. Again, let's give Joyeeta a round of applause. Now I see our guest from the European Commission has just arrived, and she's being mic'd up. Until she's able to join us here, I would like to invite you back on stage. Maud, please take a seat. And I also want to introduce Yves Desbazeille. He's the Director General at Nucleareurope. And all three of them will join Signe Ratso, Deputy Director General at DGRTD, to have a discussion about the role of climate policy as an instrument to boost the development of green technology and innovation. Yeah, I think we're almost ready. Thank you very much for coming. Please join us here.
Well, hi,
Oh, it works. Perfect.
I'm glad to see that. So to speak, innovative solutions, which are actually old ones, worked, because wiring up didn't happen. We didn't manage that, but I still have a mic, so
sometimes low tech works better than high tech. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. And I actually want to start with you. Perhaps if you could start by just giving us an explanation of what DGRTD is doing at the moment in the area of green, in the area of the Green Deal and climate change, and what are the priorities and what comes next?
Well, many thanks for the question. First of all, it's my great pleasure to join this high-level panel together with the distinguished speakers here. And before coming to what we do on the research and innovation side, I'd like to make a reference to the State of the Union address of President von der Leyen last week. I imagine I'm not the first one who's doing that, but what I'd particularly like to highlight is her strong commitment to support industry in the next phase of the European Green Deal, as this was really one of the key elements of her speech. And she also underlined that we shifted the climate agenda to being an economic one, and that Europe's industry is showing that is ready to power this transition. And she also launched a dialogue with industries on clean transition in particular. And I believe that her speech should also inspire our today's discussion here. Now, coming to what we are doing specifically in our research and innovation area, well, first of all, climate targets and climate change policies are giving us an important direction for research and innovation policies and investments in research and innovation area. They provide us with an opportunity for a better future for Europe, sustainable, more digital, more resilient, but also more autonomous. You know the Green Deal targets of 55% by 2030 and also climate neutrality by 2050. And there, clearly, green tech development and innovation are key in order to achieve these objectives. First, if we take 2030 target, we have to admit that the most of the global reductions will come from the technologies which are already available today, but we need to accelerate and scale up their deployment. In order to reach the climate neutrality, however, by 2050, almost half of emissions reductions will need to come from technologies that are, at the moment, still at demonstration or prototype phase. So this shows that European research innovation has a tremendous role to play here. So clearly, meeting these objectives, it's at the heart of European research innovation strategy, and it's also illustrated by the European research area actions that we do together with member states, but also the new European innovation agenda. You know that the objective of our program is to dedicate at least 35% of the funding of investments on the areas related to climate. And we are on good way there. But we also need to continue strengthening and capitalizing our advantages, which we have in Europe, such as knowledge creation, strong industrial base, and talent pool, mainly to ensure Europe's sustainable future, but also innovation leadership and sovereignty, because we'd like to be on the front line. We need to continue to be on the front line with all of that. So research and innovation is about creating leverage. Just to mention that 4 out of the 5 missions of Horizon Europe are related also to getting climate neutrality, climate adaptation, and so on. And there we will need to have not just researchers, but whole societies on board, including the citizens. Let's imagine that we will have this 100 climate neutral cities all over Europe by 2030, and also 150 regions which are climate change resilient, which would be a tremendous advantage, certainly for the citizen, but also an opportunity for the industries, for the startups, for SMEs in particular, which was also another focus of President von der Leyen's speech, as you recall. Also mentioning briefly blue economy, the namely restoration of the ocean as well as soils. and not to mention many partnerships that we have together with the industry and member states, also setting these objectives. Also significant parts, to conclude, of European Research Council and European Innovation Council deal with these topics, as this 35% is for the program as a whole.
I just want to circle back to what you said about the target, the 35% target in Horizon Europe. Does the Commission have an estimate of what's the level that we've reached so far in the program?
Yes, we do these estimates, and now just to mention also the links, for instance, with the recent acts, the proposals by the Commission, namely the Net Zero Industry Act, which identifies a total of R&I investments from Horizon Europe more than 21 billion for the energy transition, including net zero technologies. Then Horizon Europe invests more than 9 billion in partnerships with industry. Just to mention the areas of manufacturing, batteries, clean hydrogen, chemicals, energy-intensive industries, all of those. For example, the partnership of on zero emission for waterborne transport, which is worth 3.8 billion, will test and demonstrate a whole range of ship technologies before 2030 for the net zero shipping industry, just to give one example. I also mentioned European Innovation Council with the budget of 10 billion for the whole programming period, which really provides a one-stop shop for breakthrough innovators at all stages, and particularly has been relevant for the clean tech. It also plays an important role incentivizing and crowding in investments from the private sector. So it's not just that 1 billion, but 1 euro spent will create 5 euros added up to these investments. So it's really great in order to create the leverage and then also crowd in additional resources. As said, certainly we are collaborating in all of that with member states in particular. Well, in partnerships, they are partners. And member states have also earmarked estimated 13 billion on the Recovery Resilience Facility, namely for research and innovation. So this is also something which is coming on top in terms of the investments.
Well, thank you very much for introducing us to this world of what the Commission is planning ahead. Before we move on, I'd like to fire off a question for the three of you, perhaps. I don't know, do you have an opinion in general about how EU policy is going in terms of the Green Deal and climate change? Do you have any thoughts on that? Yves, if you could go ahead if you want.
Yeah, maybe starting with our starting point is maybe a situation of today. So because I will focus on nuclear, obviously. Situation of today is we more or less produce half of the decarbonized electricity in Europe. This was the case last year, so maybe it's going to decrease a bit with the last reactors in Germany being phased out. But and they represent 25% of the electricity being produced in Europe. So our belief is that we much more nuclear reactors should be first prolonged. We are absolutely convinced that long-term operation of reactors are a no-regret option, and this contradicts a bit some decision-making, recent decision-making in Germany and Belgium. But we see this prolongation as a no-regret option first, because it's very cheap, and it provided that the regulators consider is very cheap, very safe. There is no reason not to get there. We need more support because we need also to invest into new technologies. We discussed a bit of innovation. So first of all, we'll have to build new large reactors, and so I would say those exist already, even if there are still some potential for improvement. But we are also looking at, I would say, advanced technologies like SMRs and advanced reactors, generation 4 reactors. There are a lot of things happening in that respect. And in the longer term, we can think about also about fusion. So it's something that will come later, but still something into the horizon of time to be considered. So we, in our view, much more support should be given to nuclear by EU policies. We've seen some positive achievement with the taxonomy, which recognizes that nuclear is carbon-free, or more or less, and as such should be considered also in the policies. So this is a good step forward. But there are still many more things to be done in order to make sure that all those new advanced technologies can get off the ground. And there are a lot of support that is needed in terms of permitting, having some one-stop shop mechanism, for example, for SMRs, because we know that in each country each country comes with its own regulator, and if we want to avoid having as many licensed products as we have countries in Europe, there is a need for a good alignment on that. So I believe EU policy should be supportive to this, to give guidance to the regulators, industry, member states. Some, I would say, support also should be given on when it comes to innovation and research. Just to remind that currently the budget on fission research is 50 million euros a year. This is to be compared to
in Horizon Europe or
under Euratom Treaty,
Euratom,
but this is,
okay.
I would say, the main route, the main avenue for research support in Europe. And this figure is very small. It's even smaller than it was some years ago. It has decreased steadily over the time. And when you look at the overall budget, which has on research, which has increased so much, this is one of the budget which have really significantly decreased. And so I don't see the reason for that, because if you look at Europe as a global economy, it should be able to match with what the others are doing. And there is no comparison, for example, with what the Americans are doing, what the Russians are doing, Chinese are doing in that respect. So I believe there is much more effort to be made. So I will stop there because...
Okay, we'll come back to the nuclear question in the second half of the panel, but now I'd like to circle back to the issue of technology. So what are the technologies that are needed? I know you will have a very different opinion on that, but I don't know, Mar, do you have an opinion on this?
Yes. No, first, thank you very much for this fantastic summary, because I think in a very short time, it clearly gives a flavor of where we are going. And I think I heard today from you, Ms. Ratso, something that I also heard yesterday in the panel discussion, that is 70 or 75% of the technologies we need are already there. And this seems to imply that we should be investing on system integration, on supporting industry to deploy those technologies, on citizen acceptance. And I think that's very, very smart. I also believe, because of my background, that I think it's also very important to make sure that fundamental science continues to be a motor, an engine of innovation, because I don't know how much of those 75% technologies which are available today are European. Yeah. And what I would like is to make sure that wherever we go, wherever technologies we deploy, They come from us. They exploit the knowledge in which we have invested in the last 25 years and even beyond. And I think that's why it's important that Europe continues to have very powerful and state-of-the-art research and technology infrastructures that will support those developments. So I don't have the miracle word about the technology, but I would like to say that there is a how that we know how to do in Europe, and I think it would be a pity not to continue investment in that how.
So, Signe, the EU is ready to as you said in the beginning, that the technologies that we need for the 2050 targets are still being developed, are not quite there yet. But can you give us an idea of which direction will the EU will take in terms of the technology it will seek?
Well, there would be a role, certainly, for different technologies. And normally, well, as you know, the EU regulation is technology neutral. So we'll need to see which technology fits the purpose. And certainly, as said, some of those are still at demonstration phase. There are the different things that need to be solved in order to be deployed. Well, let's take, for instance, hydrogen technology, which is there. But in order to exploit it, we also need the infrastructure. We need, well, whether it would be in the city transport or for the ships, then we also need the infrastructure in order to really deploy that. So meaning that it's certainly it's not just the research and innovation, but also research and innovation in harmony with other policies related to the regulation, but also the other funding possibilities. I should mention certainly the cohesion structural funds, as I mentioned, RRF, where already it's agreed to also use a big part of that for R&I purposes, but also those in the area of mobility, for instance, because if we speak about the transport, the different means of transport, certainly they need to act in harmony. What I'd also like to highlight is that now, I hope this will continue, but it appears that this kind of practice has already started in different regulatory acts, also to highlight the possibility for sandboxes. Because in order to test the technologies, especially if they are breakthrough technologies, which the legislation doesn't yet provide the framework for action, there should be the possibilities for testing those. They are already in the energy area, in the transport area, also in the health area. So to create these kind of possibilities, well, last summer also we issued the work. The document, namely describing what has been done so far and how this could be used. So I also advise you to have a look. It was issued at the end of July, and certainly this is something also as a guidance for the innovators if they really find out that the regulation hinders their innovation or exploitation of the technologies, then this could be one of the ways which I wanted to highlight as well.
All right, Joyeeta, you gave us a quite different picture before this panel started. So can you repeat a bit, perhaps not entirely what you said before, but I want to understand from you what you think about the discussions that are going on at the policy level at the moment in terms of climate change, and in what way do you think the approach should be different?
So if I look at Europe in relation, the EU in relation to the rest of the world for the last 35 years, so since around 1985, I would say that the EU has been a leader globally, and the Commission has played a very strong role. So that I will accept. Then I go to my critique, which is the story about green growth. Green growth, if it means we must keep increasing our GDP, this becomes a bit challenging. And I think there's been a lot of critique about GDP, but even the Secretary General of the United Nations announced last year at the Stockholm Plus 50 conference that the concept of GDP is now out of date. So the question is, are we, if we were talking about green life, green well-being, I'd be very happy. If we're talking about green growth, then we're really going after GDP, is what I understand. So that's what worries me to some extent. The other thing that worries me is the concept of net, because net zero, if every city, every company in the world would say we do net zero, we haven't solved the climate problem, because their net means that they're reducing something somewhere else, and most likely that something somewhere else won't add up, especially at the global level. And we are already seeing a lot of research showing that net zero is an excuse to keep living on the way you are living today. And another point I wanted to talk about is, I remember I'm old, so forgive me. In 1996, there was a very strong paper on climate change in, I think it was Science or Nature, which said, don't take action now, technology will solve the problem in 20 years, make it much cheaper, or 10 years, make it much cheaper. I keep hearing that narrative. Technology will solve the problem. Today we have to change. So my argument to you would be, how are we going to change society? How are we going to make sure that we're all happy? We are already pretty happy. And we are amongst the happiest in the world. So how do we remain happy without being greedy?
That's a very good question. Yes, please.
I don't have a magic solution, I'm afraid. But clearly, what we aim at is beyond green growth. Well, it is green well-being, and for that we actually don't just need the transformation of our industry. We need the transformation of the society. We need the acceptance by the citizens of, namely, also the need to live differently, to consume differently. And actually, there is already a lot of understanding, especially if you speak about the young generation. I can also take an example of my own children, for instance. So I think there is hope that it's doable, but certainly this is not something that will change overnight. Well, if you own a car, if you're used to go everywhere by car, then it's very difficult to give it up. Just to give a very easy example. But what we did, well, first of all, what I'd like to, and this was also something that Mar mentioned, we also need to invest, and we do so, in not only in the innovations related to technology, but also in social sciences and humanities, in order to understand better what is actually driving us as people. What are the things that we need to focus if we're really aiming at this social transformation? So we do invest in the ERC, also in, well, if you are familiar with our clusters, in cluster 2, research there. But what we also do, and there we really, the missions are the experimentation, big experimentation in the program, because it's the first time we are doing research like that. And there the idea is namely to keep also citizens as part of that. That's why when we really decided what should be the mission areas, and also within these mission areas, really the main objectives, we used also citizen engagement for that. Now, just to give an example, that as part of the European Green Deal call, which was the last 1 billion call of Horizon 2020, we also had this, the citizen part. And actually, we brought together the citizens. They discussed what it would mean, namely this green transition would mean for them, what it would mean, for instance, for the food sector, how we consume food, what we are going to eat in the future in order to be green, all these kind of things. And they also issued recommendations. These are something which I hope you can find, you can give some guidance how to find those, which we published. We published a big report, And they also gave recommendations for the policymakers, what they think should be also part of the future regulations in order to make that happen. But certainly this is not something which will happen overnight or by itself. We really also need to direct our societies, not just the industries, our business, but also our societies towards this this direction. So I'm not in opposition to to what you said at all.
Okay, that's very good to hear. I'd like to ask now Mar, because Signe, you mentioned the need for multidisciplinary action, and this is something that you've been doing at CERN with the Green Village. Do you think an initiative like that can really help move broader policy, the big climate policies forward?
Absolutely. I think that's key. That's what we see when we put together these young people that come with a lot of ambition. And in addition, they are in a very rich environment because they have access to expert resources, they have access to prototyping, so it becomes very concrete. And it's true that if you could put an engineer to think about how, for instance, the elderly people should be connected, they will fill them up with thousands of sensors. And we will be controlling and understanding very well how they are feeling and what they want. But they will not wear them. And then it comes the architectural and the design and the social science and tells, well, in fact, if you want them to, embrace this change, this is what they are expecting, this is how they can do it. So we see that this is key for useful innovation. And I think also linking to something that Signe just said, I also think that we are measuring a lot of bad things. I mean, how bad we are doing. I think it's time to measure also a little bit of successes, and that those successes are seen by everyone, because we cannot do everything. So I think it would be nice to have few targets very clear at short term where the Commission can help to achieve them with very concrete measures, and that we see that this has been achieved and becomes a success. And I think this can only be made when all the stakeholders are in the equation.
Okay, before we move on, I'd like to ask the audience if there are any questions at this point. If not, think of some, and I'll come back to you in a few minutes, because we really want to. Yes, please. We have a. Can we get a microphone, please? But the folks online need to hear you as well. Oh yeah, there's a microphone here. Okay, I'm gonna help.
Whoops.
This means I'm gonna stay put for the rest. Yeah, yeah.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's for Mar, really.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm Tessa Laws. Actually I'm a lawyer. I'm based between the UK and Israel, and I'm also on the board of Science Business. So I'm disclosing, but CERN is so attractive as a proposition. Everything that you offer is fantastic, and I wish that one of my kids at least would have the opportunity to join one of the programs. But you don't mention agro-tech at all. There's no reference to agriculture, which I see as fairly fundamental for if we're going to get clusters of self-sustaining communities throughout the world.
Yes.
I see that as very important, and I just wondered if it was a decision to avoid agriculture or if it hasn't happened yet.
No. Thank you for the question. It's really very interesting. So agriculture is not one of our core competencies, I must admit. However, we are very good at sensing technologies. And in fact, we do have programs, for instance, And if I have a minute, I can explain something that
Okay,
is very
go ahead.
much linked to science. So when we do particle detection, we build these very, very complex particle detectors that we have to measure at all times, the temperature, the vibrations, because we are measuring, you know, the minuscule, I mean, the really small particles. So we have developed fibers that they are used to measure humidity inside our detectors, and those fibers are now installed in Israel to measure the humidity of the land such that you can optimize the watering of agriculture. So I don't think CERN can play a role on agriculture policy making, but there are many, many of the technologies we use that do have very concrete application for that field. So I think we are absolutely open to this type of developments where we have an expertise, we know how to install these things, how to measure, how to read them, and something very, very important, we know how to extract the relevant data. That's how we do particle physics.
Okay,
Thank you.
Signe, you wanted to also reply?
Well, just as a reference to food tech, we do a lot in Horizon Europe. We have a whole cluster 6, related to that, so the biotech, also food related. We have also the partnership, namely together with the industries for that purpose. So certainly we invest a lot from Horizon Europe. If I have a chance now, because I didn't respond to some of the things that you highlighted before, Mario mentioned the research infrastructures. Well, certainly CERN is something unique, but we have several of them. Yes. In the EU, also in the countries which are associated to our program, like Israel, for instance, and certainly this is still to some extent untapped potential, yes, which we need to utilize better. Now, this has been something that we've discussed together with the member states. Now, during the last 2 presidencies, there was a particular document which was signed during the Swedish presidency, namely, really, and this is really a big priority for us. Now to Yves, the small modular reactors. Well, you know, we also together with the previous Commissioner Gabriel, we called a big roundtable to discuss with all stakeholders, and we do also invest, namely on the safety aspects of SMRs. Yep. So certainly this is one of the technology which continues to be under the radar for the Commission. And for the citizen aspects, well, I mentioned that it's not only technology-led innovation, but it's also social innovation. And there, certainly, the citizens play an important role. We have excellent examples already from our previous program, this program, and certainly this is something that we will continue to invest, because it mobilizes the citizens to find solutions for their particular issues. But now what still needs to be done to see how we can really scale up these solutions, if possible. Well, some are very much place-based, so it would be difficult, but there are those which could be also scaled up in Europe and beyond.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer the question?
Working?
Yeah, it's on.
It does. I suppose I have a PS to the question as well, which is, we talk about social chains, which I think are vital to every single society and certainly globally. And I think it's probably one more for Joyeeta, really, but, well, for everybody, I suppose, on the panel. But is there a way that we can influence the education systems? Because I just remember when my kids were little, they would turn off the tap when they were brushing their teeth because they would say that's a waste of water. But they're much more grown up now, and I look to them, and they were educated in the UK, which, you know, obviously is outside of the EU now, but sadly, but I don't know anybody who says that their children learn about climate policy for tech value chains at school. I don't hear it from any of my friends, from any of their kids, and I just think that maybe we have a responsibility in some way to influence education. And I suppose that I don't know why I directed it to you, Joyeeta, but I think that somehow it needs to come through at a much earlier age than at than via universities. That's a PS to my point.
Thank you for that. We do have 10 minutes left or so, and I'd like to focus to change gears a bit and focus on to go back to the technology issue, because you said that the European Union doesn't, the Commission doesn't pick technologies, but the private sector sometimes does, and we've seen quite some interesting developments in the field of small modular reactors in nuclear energy, and there's also a debate going on in the European Parliament about the potentially organizing a joint undertaking on the topic. And well, my question is to you first, and then to Yves. To what extent can nuclear energy contribute to the goals of the Green Deal? And I know this is a sensitive topic for a few member states, but what do you think about it?
Well, as I said, we've been discussing the topic together with the member states. Certainly, it's also in the energy area. So it's not the research and innovation as such, where we could contribute with Euratom is really because it's the is on the safety side. It's the training program in the end, and certainly this is not something that would solve the issues. And I remember, as I made a reference to the roundtable that we hosted together with other services, then there were and there continue to be different views among member states. That's not a secret. But as I said, we have the tools to support the sector also on our side. But Yves may.
Yves,
like to
is that support sufficient in your opinion?
No, but we somehow already hinted on this, saying that more support could be needed, and I think the support that we have now, or we are about to have on SMRs will be helpful. And I think we, as you rightly reminded, there was this high-level event back in April with previous Commissioner Gabriel, and I think it was a good step forward. Just to remind a bit also about, because you mentioned some member states who are not really positive on nuclear. What I can observe also is that we see more and more member states in favor of nuclear, and I would just really like to remind here the so-called Nuclear Alliance that now gathers like 16 member states. Some are only observers, but many are very active. And this is, I must say, a sort of big shift on policies, and we see more. And if you look at their last declaration they made, it's very clear that now they are calling for technology neutrality in the policies. They are calling for support on SMR, like creating an alliance at EU level. They call also for the full application of the Euratom Treaty in its spirit, not only, so it means in its spirit, it's at the end, at the beginning, it was a promotional treaty. So I'm not saying that it will be an easy task, because we see a lot of resistance by some member states. But in a way, we see my take is that we have more and more support. And I believe it has to also to be noted that the Commission will have also more and more support, even if we have to play also with some resistance. But you cannot prevent member states to move on if they want, because they are on that they are fully protected under the Article 194 of the Lisbon Treaty. So I believe a lot of member states are going to move on, are going to invest in SMR technology, and beyond this, the AMRs technology, so advanced modular reactors, because we also see a lot of initiatives.
Just to explain to the audience, what's the difference between SMR and AMR?
Or let's say that SMRs are small reactors based on the current technologies, light water reactors, what we have today in Europe mostly. And those is a downsizing of those reactors to make them more competitive because easier to implement and with serial effect that they supposedly have of cost efficiency which will be much higher. But advanced reactors are considering other technologies. I'm not going to go into the detail of this because there are a lot of different startups that now are developing some new concepts. In my mind, I think that only in France it's like 16 startups having some different proposals to make. Obviously, not all of them will move on, but I think it makes this sector very very vibrant. We have more and more people who come with some new proposals, new ideas, and we are talking about how to attract youngsters. I believe those tech startups have a lot of people who want to apply because they see it's very cool because it's very new. And it's much cooler than the large reactors, which are like heavy industry. And I believe it's important to also have this because it will trigger interest. It already triggers interest. And we have we need a lot of new people coming in the industry with some recruitment, which have been estimated to 200,000 engineers being to be recruited in the next 30 years. So this is absolutely massive. And a very big challenge for us. Clearly.
I think you wanted to reply to that.
Well, actually, I wanted also, because now I've spent quite some time on the nuclear, also to highlight what we do in support of other green technologies. I already gave a bit of a flavor, but just now to give some more examples. For instance, you've noticed the initiative which is called STEP, that is Strategic Technologies for Europe Platform, which is namely called into action in order to help to make Europe more resilient, independent, and secure from the investments, namely in 3 priority areas, which are deep and digital tech, clean technologies, and biotech, also supporting green transition. As said, renewable clean energy technologies are focus of the Net Zero Industry Act, also part of the Green Deal Industrial Plan, and they include renewable fuels, hydrogen batteries to store this energy, which will be key to the transition to net zero as we discussed. But also in Horizon Europe, we support very ambitious offshore wind tech, materials for energy technologies, which are efficient and recyclable. Also the new materials, which certainly is something which we need to achieve. And also would like to mention hydrogen valleys, where Commission has recently increased our support to 1 billion euros to the contribution of clean hydrogen joint undertaking, in addition to 200 million, which was already there. Not to forget about the batteries, the Battery Alliance, but also now in 22, total investment topped 180 billion with 30 gigafactories, which were announced across member states. Just to give examples that we are acting on different areas and as said, in order to make the green future a reality for us and particularly for our future generations. We will need that.
Well, that's a very optimistic note. We can take one more question from the audience, if there is one. Yes, please. Please wait for the microphone and introduce yourself.
Loud enough.
Again, this is for the online audience.
Okay, Tara Lindstedt. I'm a board member of Innobat.
the Slovak battery maker with a claim to fame with a number of gigafactories. My question to all of you, how can we say that we're going to achieve this decarbonization when Europe actually doesn't have any critical raw materials of its own? So that's point number one. Point number two, how optimistic are you that we actually haven't missed the boat? Because 2030 is around the corner. We haven't really hand on heart, and I'm an engineer, and I started my career in 1992 in Brazil with the Rio 92 initiative, so I'm even older than you. So you were talking about age. So I don't see that we have really got that long to be debating in this manner. You know, I'm a bit less optimistic than the panel. And in terms of nuclear, honestly, nuclear safety and the issues we have with management of nuclear waste is a reality. It's not, you know, something that we can actually play around with. So what is your view realistically in terms of achieving our goals to manage climate change?
Who wants to take that?
I can start. I'm not optimistic on climate change, to be honest, because you just have to look at numbers. We are in 23. We have achieved, compared to 1990, I think it's minus 21, 22%, like something like this today. And we expect to get to minus 55 within the next 7 years. There's no way we can even be close to this, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think this is absolutely unrealistic, and I'm sorry, I'm talking in front of the Commission, but I can have a free talk, but I'm convinced it will. There is no way we can get there, not at all. It doesn't prevent us to make efforts. Clearly, it's not because we haven't achieved something that we are not going to pursue the same goals, but the objective are and the ambition is so massive, and the needs are so massive that we. And in my belief is we need all technologies to get there, including nuclear. So I take your point on the waste issue. For me, it's an issue which is well under control. There is no waste which is exposed to anybody. It's not a threat to anyone, sorry to say. And we can have a conversation on that. In any case, the next technologies, like Generation 4, will decrease massively the quantity of waste, and also its lifetime. So that's basically one thing. And then,
Yeah, Joyeeta, Mar, are you optimistic?
We have to phase out fossil fuels. We need to have a policy to phase out fossil fuels, not just to do other technologies. Because fossil fuels, I mean, the literature tells you that the more you invest in other technologies, the more the demand for energy goes up. So you really need to close down fossil fuel factories, which requires a sort of a different mentality. We need leadership from the top. We need people to tell us this is the way we have to go. Because if we don't, we have the lives of a lot of people on our conscience in other parts of the world and in ours. We need leadership, ma'am. And we're here
Mar?
behind you.
Yeah.
So what do you say to the
Now,
pessimists?
just to remind you that the targets that we don't have in Europe are not aspirational. They are part of our legislation. And they are giving direction to the private sector, to the government. That's why they now invest a lot more in all these areas. And just to give an example, which also President von der Leyen used, because I was, when I joined DG Research in 2018, we were discussing with the steel sector. They said it's impossible to have clean steel. Well, just read her speech again, where we were from zero and how many clean steel factories we do now have now. So it's doable. I believe it's doable. I'm on an optimistic side.
Are you also optimistic?
I'm optimistic, but I very much agree that we need leadership, we need legislation, and I think at local levels, many places, this is already a success. So I think it is possible.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. We went a bit over, so I invite you all to continue the conversation in our lunch reception just outside. Thank you all for coming. I'd like also to thank our sponsors, which made this meeting, this conference possible. So first of all, thank you to the members of the Science Business Network, to the Attract Project, GE Aerospace, Quantum Delta NL, and the European Hydrogen Week. Thank you very much for your time. And please give a round of applause to our panel.